Hey everybody, welcome to another U.S. History screencast. So we're going to be talking about how you as a teacher can illustrate what it looks like to think aloud. So this is yet another metacognitive strategy that you can use in the classroom that if you've never done before can feel a little bit weird because we kind of take advantage of the way our brains work as teachers, and we have to remember to teach our students some of the things that we take for granted, and we have to be very deliberate about how we show that to them and how we sort of think about, do they actually understand how, we think and break down things that we don't understand. So very, very important stuff. So let's jump right into it. So this is a strategy that a lot of people have done a whole bunch of research on, but essentially this is kind of like, for lack of a better term, dictionary definition. So basically you verbalize aloud while reading a selection orally. So we're going to focus on reading today, and I'm just going to do a small excerpt so we're not going through an entire book on a screencast. But the key idea there is verbalizing. So we're going to say out loud the things that we're thinking. So I know it's in the name, but just to make sure you understand that. And so I'm basically going to model what you would do, and then kind of model what a student might do. Kind of both the same thing, but hopefully this is helpful. So here's kind of just a definition if you want to pause and read that a little more in depth, but that's just kind of like a brief breakdown there. I like this. I found this on another teacher's Weebly. This is basically stems that you can use. I've printed out and given it to students. I've had them focus on one before, but let's just briefly go over them real quick. So first you have predicting. So these are the types of think alouds. You have predicting, so you can maybe kind of guess what's going to come next. You have picturing, which is kind of like what pops into your brain as you try and comprehend what's going on in this reading. Questions, questions are key as a teacher and as a student. We got to know how to ask questions and get the answers to those questions, or at least investigate the answers. Making connections, so this is kind of like that, or this reminds me of something else that we learned about. So those are where the deep connections are made there. Identifying a problem, because of course you can't fix a problem unless you can identify it. So I'm confused about, or I'm having issues here. Summarizing is key, like we talked about in the summarizer screencast. This is where you sort of put all the moving pieces together and make sense of it all. Using fix-ups, I don't really use that word, but this particular stem does, saying, okay, I'm having some problems here, I'll reread this, I'll come back to it after I've read the rest of the paragraph or whatever. And then as you can see on the far right side, it is basically all the stems without the categories or anything like that. So depending on who you want to give it to, the level of the reading and the level of the student, etc., etc., you can decide if you want to use this or which one you want to use. So hopefully that's helpful, and I'll keep this up on the next screen as well. So this particular reading that we're going to look at together today, but this is from John Smith. So if you look at the top right over there, this is hopefully you do this with your students anytime you before you read, you want to try and contextualize as much as you can. So the author is John Smith, and if you look at the year there, 1608, I'm already thinking aloud in my head. 1608, I'm pretty sure Jamestown was founded in 1607, so this is going to be early on, and if I remember, I don't think they had the easiest time early on, but I'm not sure. So, already you can do that think aloud with your students before you even jump to the document itself. So try and, hit the author, hit what it's called, the name of it is important, and the year, of course. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read just these two paragraphs just to save your time, but I am going to illustrate what it needs to look like in the classroom, or one way that it could look in the classroom. Arriving at Weramokomoko, their emperor proudly lying upon a bedstead a foot high, upon 10 or 12 mats, richly hung with many chains of great pearls about his neck, and covered with great covering of ragumkums. As you can tell by my pronunciation, I would already be thinking, I don't know what that last word means because I can't even say it. But using context clues, it's saying something about what a person is wearing. So I'm going to guess that it's some type of cloth. And then I'm going to use some other clues in here because, the word usage is important. So first of all, with a couple of the words, including Wera Moka Moka, I can guess this is talking about Native American relations. And the emperor is most likely the leader of the native tribe. I'm not sure which one yet. But I can tell that there's, the picture in my head is with this bedstead a foot high upon 10 or 12 mats. It's feeling pretty, as the word says, rich, right? So I'm getting this feeling of, somebody not only being physically above people, but there's this idea of power. And, the other image that I'm seeing is, gold and jewels everywhere, even though it doesn't say that specifically, the idea of pearls. So in my head, I'm sort of seeing this, almost this floating person up here where everyone's looking up and thinking how powerful this person is. And I'm guessing it's the Native American chief. So as you can see right there, I used some of the question stems. But basically, these are things that we do in our brain that we take for granted, but we've got to make sure our students are doing this, because sometimes they do it and they don't realize it, but a lot of times they don't know how to do this stuff. They don't know how to go deeply into a reading where they don't know exactly what everything is saying. So we got to use these think alouds to help them with their metacognitive processes. Okay? All right, so let's look at the second paragraph, and we'll talk about a few other things that you can do. At head sat a woman, at his feet another. On each side, sitting upon a mat upon the ground, were ranged his chief men on each side of the fire, 10 in a rank, and behind them as many young women, each a great chain of white beads over their shoulders, their heads painted in red, and with such grave and majestic countenance as draw me into admiration to see such a state in a naked savage. Okay, so let's go back up to the top. So what I'm seeing in my head at the top is basically just an expansion of the first paragraph, where it's painting the scene with with people around this emperor. So that just increases the idea of power in my brain. The chains of white beads, so that gives me an idea of wealth or power or something like that. And then towards the end, I'm seeing a couple of important words and one that's giving me trouble. So the word majestic. So I know that I'm thinking in my head like that has to do with your majesty. So I know majesty is like a king or a queen. So I'm thinking that's an idea of like them saying that is a person that of wealth or of power, or people look up to that person. But the word countenance is really messing with me. So I would make an educated guess. I think it has something to do with the looks of a person, because it's, after majestic, so the idea of the way the person looking is majestic. But I'm not quite sure, so I can always look that up if need be, but I think I have a general idea without having to look it up. And then another word that I'm thinking is important shortly after that is admiration. So if I'm thinking about John Smith and his feelings about meeting this grand emperor of the native tribe, is he scared? Not really, more just kind of curious, it seems like, with all this, scenery of, rich bedsteads and pearls, etc. And the word admiration is really sticking out to me. So it seems like he's admiring rather than fearing. And then one that's really thrown me for a loop here is at the end, to see such a state in a naked savage. So I'm sort of seeing this duality in John Smith's mind. He's got these preconceived notions of this quote-unquote savage, and basically what I'm thinking is what he's seeing in front of him is not savage, or is not savage-like, and it really is different. So he's in his brain, he's sort of wrestling with preconceived notions and what he's seeing in front of him, which what we would call, if I were to make a connection in my life or in real life, it's kind of like stereotypes. So the stereotype of Native Americans would be this naked savage of the time period, Yet this is anything but naked and anything but savage. It's very admirable, as he says. So a lot of the things that I just said, maybe we do without thinking in our heads as teachers, or maybe your higher level students do it. But some of the students that have trouble with reading or just have trouble understanding what's going on in a reading, especially when it feels foreign, this think aloud strategy really helps them get into, oh, so you really can just ask these questions in your brain or out loud, and this helps them with their metacognitive processes. Now, on top of that, not only the think aloud aspect of it, but what people will call gradual release. And this is become very popular. You've probably heard the classic I do, we do, you do. But essentially what it does is, you model it first, and then it's joint responsibility, and then it goes to the student. Now you can also, if you see in the chart there, you could go to collaborative learning. I like to add that you do it together, as in like in a group without the teacher. But you decide how you want to do that. But essentially this is set up in a way where you're not just like, all right, read this passage, answer some questions, and then we'll move on. Because students are going to struggle with that most likely, and that's not really helping them learn how to think or learn how to break down readings. So this is the whole document that you might use, and if you want to go to the SHEG website, there's actually a lot of documents that you can use, and there's another one that actually there's three other ones. The other one is sort of John Smith about 20 years later, and then the other two are historians arguing about what John Smith actually meant. So, definitely look this one up. I actually used this in my class. But if you were trying to figure out the gradual release, I did that earlier in the screencast. Instead of me doing the other one, you could do the we do together. And then the larger one, you could do you do, or you could do we do it together. So that's in a group, however you want to decide. But I think this breaks it down pretty well. The gradual release helps them feel a little more comfortable rather than just kind of thrown to the wall. Like I said, the think aloud strategy is a very important metacognitive strategy that helps students process information and really gives them tools that they can use outside the classroom as well. That's always great. I've said it a million times in other screencasts as well. But they can use this think aloud idea when they can't understand something. So, just break it down systematically. If you have a question, what do I see, etc., etc. And then don't forget the gradual release, the I do, we do, you do. But essentially the idea that you don't want to just say, read this, answer questions, move on. You want to give them that scaffolding that'll help them be successful inside and outside the classroom. So I hope you can use any and all of this. And as always, thank you for watching.